if you talk for just a moment about Madeleine Lefort-La Liberté, because you did know her personally, and you got to spend some time with her in a more private context as well.
Well, the way it happened was that, it would have been in the early 90s sometime, 91 or 92. I was going to give a recital in Montreal, which included some Medtner. And at the same time, there was an interview that I gave, and I think it was L'Actualité, the magazine, the Canadian magazine, and she read it, and she actually tracked me down, probably through the Musicians Union, because there's a directory, of course. I wasn't in Canada at the time, I was living in the States, but my father took the call, actually. He actually very much had known about Alfred La Liberté, more by reputation than anything else. But he certainly knew who he was. And he was delighted to hear from her. Just to be precise, La Liberté died in 52. And she was born in 1911, actually. So she was quite young when, she was a student of his. And they met, I think, in the mid-30s. Yeah, well, in the interview, she's more specific. So he died in 52, and she died in 2002. So I actually was able to visit her quite a few times. And she was gracious enough to legate to me the majority of La Liberté's score collection. That was a priceless thing to me because there were so many things in there that I'd never seen and that I haven't seen since, actually. And he collected mostly sonatas, sets of variations, and some miniatures, of course, but also transcriptions of Bach. No other transcriptions, as far as I can see. And a large portion of his collection was of Russian music, of the more conservative kind, of course. Not he didn't have time for any of the Russian futurists. He really stuck to Scriabin as the only modern composer, I think. So she was really, really very generous to me. And I remember visiting her once. I was about to play at an ulterior concert, the Sonata Reminiscenza of Medtner. And so I, out of sheer pleasure, I sat down at La Liberté's piano, which she still had, and which was an incredible piece of furniture with 16 kinds of inlaid wood and banners with composers' names and angels and whatnot. And I started playing the Sonata Reminiscenza, and she suddenly excused herself and came back to me and plopped the manuscript in front of me as I was playing. My jaw hit the floor with a resounding thud. And I said, "Oh my God, please, could you please make a copy of it for me?"
Yeah.
And on my next visit, she actually presented me with the manuscript itself. It's one of the greatest joys I've ever had.
Yeah, extraordinary.
And the nice thing about La Liberté's friendship with Scriabin is that he actually, Scriabin let La Liberté have quite a few of his manuscripts, including the Poem of Ecstasy, the Fifth Sonata, and I think the piano pieces 56, 57, and 58, if I remember well. And it's a little known fact that the Fifth Sonata was actually written with La Liberté in mind.
That's amazing.
He said in a letter to La Liberté, he said, "I think it will really suit your type of fire and temperament at the keyboard." But as far as I remember, Scriabin never dedicated any of his works to anyone. So if he had, I think La Liberté's name would have been immortalized at the heading of the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is just an incredible piece of information. I feel like this is something that should be very well known, because looking at Scriabin's body of work, the Fifth Sonata is it's a very important work.
Yes. People know a little bit more about it now simply because when the firm Barenreiter came out with a new edition of the Scriabin sonatas, I supplied the manuscript to the editor, as well as the Scriabin letters, and he actually He mentions that story in the preface. So there's a whole background about La Liberté. It's there at least.
Absolutely. So the process of spreading the word about that has started.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, to me, that also seems quite important from a musical point of view, because you were saying earlier that a lot of this information should be preserved for the benefit of scholarship, and of course, that's absolutely true. But I also wonder about how this relates to our understanding of the music and the musical interpretation, because here, unfortunately, we don't have recordings of these people, but we know about La Liberté as a remarkable musician, a composer himself. So, and Scriabin's comment that he had the fire that was necessary for playing that work. I feel like already that gives interpretive insights into the kind of playing that sonata is meant for.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we don't have any recorded examples of La Liberté's playing. I mean, I'm not sure he was even interested in making recordings.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe he never had the opportunity. According to his widow, Madeleine, apparently his sound was amazing. At one point, she recounts the story of playing on two pianos a Bach concerto. I think it was the D minor concerto. And she was playing the solo part, and he was doing the orchestra part. And he started playing, of course, because the piano doesn't come in. And she just forgot to come in when she was supposed to. And he said, "What's the matter? Don't you know it?" And she was so mesmerized by his sound. She said it was like almost like a whole orchestra behind me. I'd never heard anything like it.
Yeah, you actually anticipated my question there, because I was going to ask, whether, because Madeleine de La Liberté, she lived for such a long time after her husband passed away.
She died at 91, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So was there a sort of a school of piano playing that followed after La Liberté, that Madeleine was able to carry on? Is there a school of learning or teaching associated with him that existed after his time?
I don't think so. The fact that he is a largely forgotten name is perhaps, I think, indicative of that. Whereas a name like Yvonne Hubert, who I studied with and who was in Canada right from the 20s, is still talked about to this day. I mean, that's really saying something. But La Liberté also, it has to be said, had a temper. And apparently he could be very encouraging, and he could also be brutal, really brutal. He expected and demanded excellence and hard work. And maybe that's why he is not remembered really as he should be remembered, I think.
So are you saying that as a result of his personality, he was difficult to work with and made a lot of enemies?
He certainly had some enemies, yes. To my knowledge, there has never been, not that I've researched this very much, but I think I would have heard about any areas of research about him. The thing is that very little has been preserved. If you want to know him a little bit better, and if you have a scholarly bent, his whole collection was donated by his widow to the National Archives in Ottawa. And there you will find heaps of correspondence and also his compositions. Many, many years ago, I asked the archives to photocopy for me the entire correspondence between him and both Nikolai Mettner and his wife. And it's in 3 languages, French, English, and German. And I haven't even gone through all of it, and I've had it for many years. The one time that I went there, I remember seeing a letter from Rachmaninoff to La Liberté, because he knew a lot of people. I mean, he had a studio in Montreal, and all the great artists just came through it. But Rachmaninoff is asking him, "Oh, would you have a spare copy of the Mettner 2 Tales, Opus 20? Because I want to play them in my concerts, and I can't locate a copy." That's that kind of thing. I think that's kind of sweet. I mean, I seem to remember seeing a letter from Glazunov as well, and all kinds of people.
Yeah. So he was, in other words, centrally connected to the whole, the whole sort of world of musical happenings. A lot of the key players from Russia and other places in Europe, because of course he lived in Brussels. He was in. I shouldn't say that. Sorry, I misspoke, because he went to visit Scriabin when Scriabin was in Brussels.
Yeah, but he actually first met him in New York, because Scriabin was coming here to New York for a series of concerts.
How did that actually happen, Marc?
Well, it's a fascinating story. Mrs. La Liberté would tell it much better than I ever could. But he wrote a fan letter to Scriabin after discovering his fourth sonata. And he learned that Scriabin was going to be in New York. And Scriabin answered him. He said, "Come and see me. The person who has written to me about my fourth sonata with such knowledgeability and love, we should meet." So La Liberté leaves Montreal without even thinking about, with just the clothes on his back, without bringing any pocket money, or he forgot. He didn't even take the Scriabin's address, and then he gets to New York and just wanders around and got stopped many times because cops thought he was a vagrant, and then just ducks into the first hotel he sees, and he's in the lobby, and suddenly he hears a voice saying, "Alfred, we've been waiting for you since yesterday." And he says, "Who's this?" He says, Sasha Scriabin."
What an incredible story.
That's bare bones. I mean, it's a little more involved than that, but there is another story that she tells.
Yeah.
A couple of students had come to see him in Brussels, actually, when he was there, and he was demonstrating his fifth sonata, which was just finished, and then suddenly his whole demeanor changed, and he looked thunderstruck, and he excused himself, and then he went to the other room and he said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just felt that Rimsky-Korsakov died in Russia just today." And it was true. I personally find it difficult to believe these kinds of things, but it certainly seems genuine enough.
Well, Yeah, it's very difficult to believe. It really sends the shivers down the spine.
Hmm.
And listening to you repeat that story, the whole point, I guess, is that these people were living in a different time, and they had, in many ways, I think they had contact with a different reality than maybe what we're used to
Hmm.
today.
Well,
Yeah, it's very
he
difficult to
certainly did.
articulate because I think even your description of how La Liberté went to New York and so on, these were very passionate people and they had different values and priorities. I don't think we can ever lose sight of the fact that Scriabin was a creative genius,
Uh,
and that does mean something.
yeah, it's unfortunate that they fell out
Yeah.
eventually over the question of Scriabin's first wife, who never actually granted him a divorce, was apparently a very gifted pianist, and even after they separated, still went on performing his music very much against his wishes, but couldn't do anything about it. And she had the help of people like Vasily Safonov and people like that. He really took issue with the fact that La Liberté encouraged people to go to these concerts.
Mhm.
And Scriabin said, "Well, you're encouraging my enemies."
Mhm.
And La Liberté said, "It's your music that I love, and not you." So that was the break. He later attempted a reconciliation, La Liberté did, by writing to Scriabin, but it was during Scriabin's final illness, and I think he never was able to respond.
So is that what La Liberté, he actually replied to Scriabin? Because that's something I haven't seen in the letters.
Well, that's mentioned. She mentions that thing. Madeleine does, in her interview.
That's a very unfortunate thing. I know we know that Scriabin's personal life was sort of controversial and even scandalous by the standards of the day, right? Because he wanted to remarry and went on and had a family with another person. And I think his early biographers actually said that he had a second wife, but in fact that wasn't correct because
Never a marriage. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's right. So that was a very sensitive issue. It's interesting that he objected to his ex-wife playing, or sorry, his estranged wife playing his works. Whereas for La Liberté, it kind of seems like it didn't really matter as long as they were played well. The important thing
Yeah.
was that the music should be disseminated.
That's quite true. But it's pretty detailed, actually, in the last Scriabin letter to La Liberté. Yeah, it's a shame that La Liberté's side of the correspondence was never preserved. That also goes for the correspondence with Mettner. I mean, I have all their letters to him, but not one, I think, of his to them.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so that was a question I had, whether his side of it was in the archives at all. So the answer is no.
No, I don't believe so.
So what are the artifacts that remain from La Liberté's life and work from his own hands? So we have some work that he wrote and published, notably on Mettner, and we have some of his compositions, but most of those, I think you mentioned, are also not complete.
Yeah, that's true. Although I just today, actually, I have a large box which has all this correspondence that I mentioned, and some photocopies of interesting Mettner manuscripts that were in his possession, and also copies of his compositions, both in manuscript and also the few works that got published. There are a few songs that were published by Max Eschig in the 1920s. And that's really, I mean, I don't know of anything else that actually came out officially.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a contradiction here that I would love to hear you comment on, because on the one hand, you've explained how La Liberté was this really important personality in music history, not just in Canadian music history, but definitely in Canadian music history and more generally as well. And we have all of these historical records linking us back to some of the magic of what was happening at the time around him. But on the other hand, we don't seem to have a tradition of music training that's followed after his time, even though he was very active as a teacher and Madeleine outlived him by a significant amount of time. And we don't have a lot of his compositions, in fact, hardly any that are actively performed or recorded today as part of the classical repertoire.
His biggest project was an opera on Sœur Béatrice of Maurice Maeterlinck, and he never finished it, although it's years ago. I remember seeing very copious sketches for it. His handwriting, I think, was a little discouraging because a lot of that Sœur Béatrice, I mean, it looks very complicated, and it's all in pencil, and it's fading, and oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know what the music is like, and I don't know whether it would even be worth bothering with. Perhaps it is, but who's to know?
Well, that was my next question for you, because you have all of this material that you've essentially inherited. And where do you go from here? What do you think needs to be done? What do you think you can do? I mean, are those scores that you received from Madame de la Liberté, are they of works that you will ever play or record or even teach? Where do you see all of this going in the future?
Most of what he produced, I think, was vocal music. I mean, and he had a very great, very, very great interest in folklore. So he produced a number of folkloric settings. And from what I could see, I mean, I just started looking at this box again. I mean, there's maybe just a couple of piano pieces, and they're miniatures and nothing more. I don't think he really created anything significant like a sonata or whatever for the solo instrument. Maybe there is more than that, and I'd have to go to Ottawa again to really dig into the collection in earnest. And I'm sure there's quite a lot that I would be surprised and delighted by. I recently read a biography of the Russian-French mystical composer Nikolai Obukhov. And it's written in Russian, but it was translated into French. And it's not a biography as such, but a sort of a reconstruction, an attempt at a reconstruction of his life. But the woman who wrote it, I have to commend her tenacity, because it seems that she had very little to work with, and large chunks of his life in there that are just missing. The book is still remarkable, and I just have the feeling that the same would happen with La Liberté if anybody attempted to write a book about him, because there's a lot that we just don't know. And if I could go back in time and talk to Mrs. La Liberté again, I would ask a ton of questions, and I would really insist on a lot of details, which I'm sure she would have given me, because she was really actually wonderfully lucid to the very end. And musically extremely knowledgeable. She used to be a pianist. As I said, there's really nobody left of that period. It's a damn shame.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the importance of this is something that's really striking to me as someone who loves classical music and is involved in that, because the whole point of a classical tradition is that there are remarkable people at every stage of the history, and, preserving that memory. And I don't think preserving means putting things in an archive necessarily, because it's really only when knowledge and ideas are in circulation and they're in people's minds that the preservation has fully happened. Mm-hmm. As you're saying, these materials are in the archives, and that's great. That is a form of preservation. Thank goodness, these documents and these letters and scores are still around. And I'm sure that so many people would find these stories and this knowledge so inspiring. I know I certainly have, because having fallen in love with Scriabin as well, and, developed a really passionate interest in his music, it was an amazing thing for me to discover that there is a link between Canada and Scriabin through this remarkable Canadian personality that I had never heard about before. And it's literally opened up worlds for the imagination to wander in. And I think it definitely makes you think about the music and understand it in a different way. It becomes something much closer, more relatable, and more intimate, I think, once you know about this incredible background.
One thing I wanted to mention that I was thinking about the other day, there was a short-lived piano festival in the late 80s, early 90s, which is at the time that I met Madeleine Laliberté. And they wanted me to play a program which would have been an homage to La Liberté. I didn't think at the time of asking what the impulse was behind that, but all I knew about him was that he loved Russian music. I didn't have any more specific information than that. So I put together a program that included, Scriabin, for example, but I also included Prokofiev and Shostakovich. She said, you have to understand that Shostakovich and Prokofiev were not among his loves. Of course, I changed the program. I was more than happy to, but it was just a total misconception.
Well, how could you have known? But you found out.
It's not that he loved all Russian music, but he loved a great deal of it.
Absolutely. And so was that a program that you ended up giving at this festival?
Yeah, but I changed it. As a matter of fact, he liked French music as well. So if I'm thinking of the same concert, the first half ended up being the Sonata by Paul Dukas.
Amazing. Well, it might be time to do another event like that one. Because it seems like you've done so much work on Scriabin since then, not only in terms of, collecting this material and bringing it out with the Baron edition and so on, and everything that you've done to help to preserve this history, but of course your recordings and performances of Scriabin since then.
Well, it would be a great idea for a CD, actually, to have an homage to La Liberté.
Absolutely.
And all of these composers that he collected, and there were many names that are very, very seldom heard today. I mean, who knows, for example, the compositions of Sergei Lyapunov, who really wrote for the piano absolutely marvelously. He has a set, for example, of 12 transcendental studies dedicated to the memory of Liszt. And they're pianistically really sumptuous. And I think young pianists are starting to play a few. But for many, many years, nobody was giving them any attention. But they're really, really, really worth your time. And that's just an example. There's many other things.
Absolutely. Well, I just can't overstate how much I think your leadership in this area is so important for the musical community.
Yeah, it's very nice of you to say that, because I have the feeling that all I'm doing is I'm just doing what I like. And I have the freedom to do so, which is really marvelous. Because from rather early on, I mean, I was able to associate with a label which really was into this kind of exploration and encouraged it.
You're referring to Hyperion?
Hyperion,
you record now? Yeah.
And still, I'm oh my God, I'm up to my 65th release, I think, with them.
Fantastic.
If I'm counting right, and there's 2 others in the can at this time that haven't come out yet.
Well, clearly the passion that encouraged Alfred Laliberté to drop everything and rush to New York to meet his musical idol, clearly this passion inspires you as well. And so I'm sure that I'm not alone in saying that I greatly look forward to reading and hearing what it is that you do decide to take forward from all of this. I hear the passion in your voice, and I have no doubt that there is going to be more ahead.
Oh, the world of piano music, the repertoire is a horn of plenty. There is never an end to discovery. We have the largest repertoire by far of any instrument. It's just a pity that so many pianists don't take advantage of it, and they're just playing it safe. If they can do it marvelously, then fine, I don't object. But it's also a shame to deprive yourself of the joy of exploration.
Absolutely. And I mean, I just find this so important to hear what you're saying in this regard, because playing it safe, I think, is maybe more the sense that I have of the way things are going in this community and the kind of music that we're hearing as time goes on. You know, the kind of spirit of inquiry and discovery that you're talking about, of constant curiosity, you know, which hasn't left you after decades that you've been active.
It's growing.
I mean, if anything, exactly. And I find that so inspiring. And I'm sure that so many musicians who hear you talk about this are going to feel the same way, because it's a completely different perspective on the arts and what we should be doing.
Yeah, it's such a shame that life is so short. I mean, it's ridiculous. The piano repertoire, I mean, there's enough for several lifetimes. And even then, you'd just be scratching the surface.
Absolutely. I keep coming across this quotation recently, and I'm not sure where it's from, but the quotation is, "Art is long and life is short."
Yeah, art is infinite, I think, even.
Absolutely. And here we are again at that undeniable conclusion. It's a very appropriate note, because just as you say, we can barely scratch the surface of piano repertoire in a lifetime, even for someone like you who has the capacity to learn so much. And the same could be said in a way of the history, the stories that we're talking about. There's just so much that we could uncover, and we've just scratched the surface in this discussion. But it's been wonderful.
Oh, it certainly has. You should talk some more, maybe on tangential subjects.